G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with drummer of the Kingsmen, Dick Peterson. Dick joined the Kingsmen in late 1963 at the age of 17. This was just as the band's now legendary song, Louie, was becoming a major hit. He has performed with the group ever since then, and today is the last surviving member from the group's hit days of the 1960s still performing live with the band. Although he is not featured on the group's original recording of Louie, he was a part of the band at the height of their success and is on many of the other great tracks the group recorded throughout the 1960s. G'day Dick, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Let's start at the beginning, Dick. So you were born around the Portland, Oregon area in the mid-40s, and you grew up during the late 40s, early 50s. What was your childhood like growing up?
Well, I grew up in a really small town, Gig Harbor, Washington. Moved to Portland for my high school years. But growing up in Gig Harbor was just like, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn sort of existence. Our town had a population of 720. My stepfather was the town doctor, the only doctor in the town. Being that we went to school in a one-room schoolhouse, first through sixth grade. Every year we moved over another grade. My father, as well as the whole community, worked off of a barter system mostly. So my father came home one night and said, which one of you wants to take piano lessons? And none of us wanted piano lessons. So we drew straws, and I lost. So I started taking piano lessons, and it got me into music, and I developed a love for it. I took up drums and played piano and drums in high school. And when I got into my senior year, Louie had been recorded, and before my senior year was over, we were one of the hottest bands in the United States of America, touring all over the country with Louie under our belt.
Would you say that your parents were musical?
My mother played piano, although not well. She played what she played well, but she wasn't classically trained. And my father played guitar.
What would you say are some of your early musical influences now that looking back?
Well, actually, I was raised on Beethoven and Shostakovich,
okay.
Two of my absolute all-time favorites. When I didn't get into rock and roll until I auditioned for the Kingsmen. The Kingsmen were fairly famous locally. They were the biggest band in Portland, Oregon. And the band had gotten all the way through high school playing local gigs. And we had a draft in those days into the Army here. The drummer was drafted, and I sat across the table from the bass player of the Kingsmen's girlfriend, and she asked me if I played rock and roll drums, and I said, no, I don't really. I played in timpani and percussion in an orchestra, although I had a set of drums, and I played with a local jazz great, Tom Grant. We had a little trio, and I was playing jazz in his band. And she said, well, you should come audition because the drummer's been drafted. And they make about $20 a weekend a piece. That sounded like a fortune to me compared to what I was making. Gasoline in those days was about 32 cents a gallon, so I could fill my car up for $5. So I said, wow, where do I audition? And she gave me a list of the songs that the band was playing. I went home and I bought the records and played along with them to my stereo. And when I hit the audition, I already knew everything they were playing, and I got the job. And within a couple of months, we had a hit record that was flying up the charts. I just got lucky.
Yeah, and I mean, coming from that classical music background, when you kind of were first hearing what the music the Kingsmen were doing, what was your first kind of reaction to that, coming from that classical music background?
I thought it was really simple and sort of mindless, and I really didn't like it until I played my first gig. And once I played my first gig and the house was packed and the kids were having a great time dancing, it was really a lot of fun.
Like you mentioned there that before you joined, they recorded Louie before you joined. And although you weren't there on the recording, could you tell me a little bit about how that kind of song came to be played by the group and a bit about the recording?
Sure. Louie was a hit in the Northwest. You know, where we live, to the east of us are the Rocky Mountains, and to the south is a huge expanse before you get to Los Angeles. It's like 1,400 miles. So the Northwest was its own little area, pocket of music. And there was a group here called the Wailers that had a hit song called Tall Cool One. And one of their signature songs that they did live was Louie Louie. They did it more like the original 50s recording, like Richard Berry, who wrote the song, did it. When the Kingsmen started playing it, it was an instrumental, and Mike, it was a solo opportunity for Mike. He just played a solo all the way through the song. And in the summer of 1963, the leader of the band, Lynn, his father, had an opportunity for the band come his way where he wanted to get a tape made to get a job for the summer on a cruise liner. And they wanted something sort of calypso and Jamaican. And Louie Louie was about the most Jamaican song that the band played, but they wanted vocals. And so the rhythm guitar player knew the lyrics to Louie Louie, and the band went in the recording studio, and with just basically one mic overhead, not vocal mics and not separate, but everything was sort of done live, mono, and in one take recorded Louie Louie, which was a calypso song. You know, originally the song was like a reggae sort of beat. It was a doobie doo bop bop doobie doo dop cut up boobie doo bop bodo. Well, to the Kingsmen, who weren't that well schooled, da na na da 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 na na sounded just like it.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the band recorded Louie Louie, and then a year later, it was picked up by Arnie Woo Boo Ginsberg, who was a disc jockey in Boston. When he picked the song up, he started playing it. He was on a mission to find the worst record ever recorded. So he started playing Louie Louie, and it started hitting the airwaves, and before you knew it, no one could understand the lyrics because it was so poorly recorded that a rumor started flying around the U.S. that it was full of dirty words. And boy, that's all it took, because the FCC banned Louie Louie from the airwaves. Governor Walsh of the state of Indiana, he said Louie Louie couldn't be played in his state. And then the FCC got involved, and the FBI got involved. They were investigating the group for subversive lyrics, and we were working our eyes out.
And you know, I think the most ironic thing about the whole FBI investigation is that, you know, they're listening to this record over and over again, trying to find, you know, anything dirty about it. And they missed that, I think it's like 54 seconds in, Lynn Easton drops his drumsticks or something and yells the F-bomb. I mean, they missed that. Like,
yeah, they missed. They sure did. And he does. They just thought he yelled, you know, You know, I don't know if you've ever seen Mr. Holland's Opus, but Louie Louie was featured in there. Richard Dreyfuss asked one of his musicians who wants to quit music. And he said, here, I want to play something for you. And he puts the record on, and he says, you know, after the record plays, he said, what do you think of that? She said, well, I don't think it's very good. He said, well, tell me how you felt. And she said, well, it felt like they were having fun.
Yeah.
And he said, that's what music's supposed to be, have fun. And that's what your problem is you don't have fun. You take everything too seriously. You should be basically like the Kingsmen. It all should be fun, no matter how well or how horribly you play.
Yeah.
It's for fun. And it went on from there.
Earlier you mentioned that audition you did, and I'm thinking, like, from that audition to like when you played the first gig with them, like how much time was between like that audition and the first gig you kind of played with the Kingsmen?
A week.
Wow, okay. So straight into it.
Yeah, I joined in January, and we had our first tour in February.
Yeah, and do you remember that first gig that you played with them?
I sure do. I absolutely do. We played. It was a place called the Target, and it was basically an archery range. It was archery land. That's what it was called. And they had all these targets on the wall, and it was an indoor archery place. And they just cleared everything out and had a dance with kids in it. Probably had 1,000 people in there.
And I mean, you mentioned, like, you know, once you kind of played that gig that you kind of started to get the music. Was that like the moment you kind of played that gig, you kind of understood what it was all about, like the Kingsmen's type of music?
Yeah, it was about fun. It was about having a party. You know, we recorded 9 albums, all of them live with just a couple of microphones. Nobody trying to do anything fancy. We did cover songs. We did whatever, just for fun. And the album sold incredibly well just because they were fun. When we, you know, on our tours, for example, our first tour, we played Minnesota. and we had to drive from Portland to Minnesota. And on the way, we started hearing Louie on the radio, and we would call the radio station and let them know, like in Cheyenne, Wyoming, we're coming through Cheyenne. Love to stop and say hi. Thank you so much for playing the record. And you get on air, and the guy says, you guys staying here tonight? Yeah, we're going to be here. Well, why don't we throw a dance? Oh, can you get a place? Yeah, we'll go down to the Armory. So then they would just say, come on, kids, we're going to have a dance. What is it, $2 at the door? Come on in. The place would be jammed. And it was in same day as the interview.
Yeah.
We played 4 hours a night. We didn't just play like an hour. We played 4 hours a night on our first tour. It was 13 weeks long, and we played every single night.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, right. I mean, did you enjoy playing that, shows that long? Was it was it a lot of fun?
It was grueling, and you'd be exhausted, but I was only 17. The other guys were 19. When you're in good shape like that and you're young, you don't know you're beating your body up. It's just fun. And you play the gig, you get in the rig, and you run to the next town. You sleep, you get up, and you play. You don't really get to see much except all the landscape across the U.S. You don't get to visit the cities because you're so busy working every night. It was awesome. And the kids were having so much fun, and we were having so much fun. Every city was different. Every American city was different. All the kids were incredible. It was we worked 5 years straight and only took 13 days off a year.
You mentioned that first tour began, I think you mentioned February 1963. By what time did Louie become the hit that we know it to be? Was it directly?
Well, that was I joined in January '63. January of '63. In February, December. My first audition was in December of 1963. And then 1964, in January, I had my first gig, and our first tour started in February. So the whole thing took less than a month.
Okay. I mean, because you were only about 17 at the time. Am I right about that number, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I was 17.
Yeah. I mean, for a 17-year-old, to be in the number one group almost at the time, how does that feel as a 17-year-old being in a rock and roll group that's doing really good?
It was awesome. We played dance halls, famous dance halls all across the country. And by the time April came along, we were making so much noise and we were doing so well that we toured with the Beach Boys the summer of '64. We did 40 dates with those guys, and we had you can't imagine how much fun 10 teenagers who are loose on the world can have when you're just having that much fun. We went from playing dance halls, and once we joined the Beach Boys on their tour, we started playing ballparks and big coliseums. And then, of course, the band really took off, and we started playing colleges and playing their field houses and to huge crowds, basically because of the controversy. And once we played, we were a very good band. We were really loud, and it was just raucous fun. So once we played, the colleges just started booking us back. And like I say, we toured solid for 5 years. Money was off the charts. I couldn't believe there was so much money. After our first tour, it was 13 weeks, I came home and bought a new car and bought my mother a house.
Wow. That's pretty cool, Dick, I got to say. I mean, what car did you buy?
I bought a 1964 Chevrolet Chevelle Super Sport.
Do you still have that car?
No, I don't. I only had it about 2 months. I had a bunch of work done to the engine because, we used to drag cars in those days, and I got into dragging. So while I was on tour, my uncle did a lot of work to the car and built the motor up, put positive traction in it, put on a high-rise manifold, a different cam. He did all kinds of work to it so that when I got home, it was screaming fast. And I went out for a drive in the car, and I drove by a Jaguar dealership, and I saw this 1966, it was, XKE, red convertible in a showroom. And I'll tell you what, that was the end of that Chevelle. It was, I stopped and I bought the car right there. It was in 1965 when we got home off the tour. And I didn't even have 5,000 miles on that Chevelle. And that car, that was my favorite car. I just loved it. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, and look, I love cars from that time too. I think they're just beautiful. And I mean, you mentioned there too that you bought your mum a house. I mean, your parents must have been really proud of you, Dick. Like for like all the things you were doing, you know.
You know, not only did I have their support when I was growing up, but they supported me up until they passed.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, they were very, very proud. And my bartered lessons worked. It's been a fantastic life for me.
When you first kind of joined the Kingsmen and like, these that first tour in 1964, like, did you connect well with the other guys like Mike Mitchell and Lynn Easton? Like, did you really get along well with them straight away?
Absolutely did. We were a brotherhood.
Mm.
Yeah, we were having so much fun, and everybody was playing so well. And we were all traveling together. There were no egos in the band. We were just amazed every time people showed up. It was crazy. And yeah, we were a brotherhood. We just got to be, we were family. And the other guys kind of looked out for me because obviously I was the youngest and not nearly as experienced in the world as they were. And we had a lot of fun.
Being so young, I mean, I bet you would have learned a lot like about life while on the road and just just learning lots of new things about the world. Like, did you find that? Was that something that you kind of picked up while going through, like, touring so young?
Yes. And, Mike Mitchell had such a great influence on me. He was a really kind, decent man, very respectful of people and of the crowds. Mike was one of the finest humans that ever walked the planet. And he kind of took me under his wing and made sure everything was cool. I hadn't been on my own, and they had all been in college, for a year. So at least they knew a little bit about being on their own. I was still in high school and living at home. And so when I went on the road, it was the first time I was responsible for myself, my own living, what I was eating, what I was doing. And Mike pretty much made sure I was doing mostly the right things.
Yeah. And, I know that we lost Mike not too long ago, and look, I can imagine that would have been really impact you a lot, Dick. And
unbelievable. Yeah, he was my best friend ever.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a crazy story. Back in the 90s, we were asked to do a benefit, and it was back in Louisville, Kentucky, and so I flew in to do some of the promos that were on the radio and on television. And it was about, a week or two before the concert, just to help ticket sales. And I went into this radio station, and sitting at the microphone was Joe Walsh. And so I came in and they introduced me. That was the first time I met Joe. And on air, he said, "Wait, you're with the Kingsmen?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "So Mike Mitchell personally?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been touring with him for 20-some years or 30 years. And he said, he got on his knees and he started bowing. And he said, "Mike Mitchell is my hero." And I said, "You're kidding me." And he said, No. He said, "I learned to play guitar by listening to your records." And he was laughing. He said, "The reason why I could play that stuff, Mike played stuff so simply and solos with all the mistakes." He said, "I can play all the mistakes as well because we played live." And he says, "I love the mistakes." After his passing, I got emails from so many guitar players, famous people that loved Mike and that learned to play by listening to Mike's records, because that's what we all did. You listen to records and you kind of nick those solos, and it became part of what you do. Billy Gibbons is another guy that Mike was friends with that they just loved him and loved to sit and jam whenever he came up to Portland. Mike didn't have a national presence with fans, but with guitar players, very well-known guy.
Yeah. You mentioned there too, like the Joe Walsh story, and how it's mistakes and all, and I think and that kind of brings me back to like the how like no one could kind of understand the lyrics kind of thing, because like the FBI investigated that song for a year, and I mean, did any FBI agents ever like interact with you? Like, did they ever come up to you?
Oh, no doubt about it. In those days, the kids wore whale cords and they had hip huggers, the girls, little tank tops and all. And so our crowds were filled with kids like that, except you would see these guys in gray flannel suits. And you knew who they were. They were from the FBI. And we put out a song. I don't know how well it did down there, but we put out a record that was a joke. the record company just kept pouring things out. So we thought we'd do a joke record. And we recorded Jolly Green Giant, which is a food company here in the U.S., and they have all kinds of commercials about, ho, 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 Green Giant vegetables, right?
Yeah.
So we put out this joke record thinking that the record company would say, all right, boys, why don't we try to do something really good? Because we wanted to record something, but we just go in and record whatever we knew. So the corporation that owned Green Giant, the West Coast, filed a lawsuit against us for defaming their character. But the East Coast started sending canned goods to all of our concerts. When they found out it was good promo for them, well, of course, the West Coast dropped their lawsuit. But we would have FBI agents that we became friends with helping us hand out canned goods after our concert. And, they'd be there taking pictures of us and interviewing us, just kind of supposedly on the sly. But they would help keep order. It was really kind of fun. And we were in Boston. Actually, we were in Lowell, Massachusetts, just north of Boston. And it was about 6 o'clock in the morning when the FBI came banging on our doors, and they wanted an official interview. And we all went down to the conference room at a Holiday Inn and sat with the FBI, and they wanted us on the record because they were going to go in front of a federal judge about lifting the ban on Louie. And so we sat there, answered their questions. Are there dirty lyrics in the song? Nope, there's no dirty lyrics. Can you tell me what this said? Can you tell me what this did? We've had agents at your concerts. Yeah, we know John. He's a good guy. So they went to court. The record company went to court to get the ban lifted. And the FCC was questioned by the judge. What have you done to understand what these boys are saying on the record? And they said, well, we played it at 33, we played it at 16, we played it backwards, we played it forwards, we played it at 78. And so here are the different versions that we hear. And the judge is looking at these, however many different versions that people have submitted. And he said, well, it looks to me like nobody can decide what's on this record except what the Kingsmen say. So the judge says, let me hear this thing. So he listened to it. And his thing was, well, first of all, this is one of the worst records I've ever heard. I can't understand why anybody would want to buy it. But secondly, it seems to me everybody is in agreement that it's unintelligible at any speed. And they're all like, yeah. He says, so that's what I'm going to deem. I'm lifting the ban. I'm calling it unintelligible. You can't tell what they're saying. So who knows? And he lifted the ban, and that hit the UP and the AP wire services here because we didn't have the internet in those days. And it went across the country like wildfire, and it sparked a whole another 2 years of tours.
Something that a lot of people forget is that, like, the Kingsmen had, like, another big hit, and that was that. They didn't just have Louie, they had the Jolly Green Giant, because that went to number 4 in the US, and I think it went to number 1 in Canada. That's a pretty, like, decent size hit, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely. Well, in Billboard it was 4, but on Record World it was number 1. And here's the thing about the ratings for records. It's kind of weird. The Kingsmen, because of the way we toured, our recordings didn't hit the country all at one time. It was like a wave. Louie was number 1 on the East Coast before the Midwest found it. And it was already declining and going top 10 when the Midwest found the band. And then it went to number 1 in the Midwest, and it started to decline until the West Coast found it. Therefore, it bubbled right around, 5, 6 because of sales, because it's their weekly charts. And Jolly Green Giant was the same thing.
Yeah.
And so was Money and Little Loud and Loopy Loo. They were all top chart records for us that we were on the airwaves like crazy for quite a while. We had 4 really strong records in a 2-year span. But Louie made us legendary, especially among college kids. It just became this legend. But it did launch all of the other records. Our career was basically over. We played from 64 right through until almost 70. And then, of course, the psychedelic era was coming in 69, and the kids were doing, they were turning on and tuning out, supposedly. And so our crowd started dwindling when people started getting loaded. And we didn't have much of a career after that until Animal House was released. And once Animal House was released, Louie and the Kingsmen went from having this incredible career that was kind of flash in the pan, just a normal rock and roll 4 or 5 year career, to all of a sudden we're still playing. We're still in demand out there, colleges and fairs and festivals.
Oh yeah.
You want to have a party? Hire the Kingsmen. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a great motto right there. That's a fantastic motto. And I mean, you mentioned the psychedelic era there. And I mean, what did you think of all that? Like how music was changing? Like, I mean, we're talking probably around 1966 here, 67, psychedelic music's coming in. Like, how did you guys, like what did you think about that kind of musical change happening?
Well, it was a change because I think what you have to do is go back and look at what radio was in that day. You know, when we played concerts, at big concerts, we played top 40, which meant we would share a dressing room with Johnny Cash, for example. We played with him because he would be on the show. So when you listen to radio, you might listen to a country song, and then you listen to a rock and roll song, and then maybe Frank Sinatra, and then maybe Jimmy Smith. Radio, when you had a top 40 station, they played all the records from every genre. They didn't have it separated like it is today in pop and in rap and in whatever. It wasn't separated. So you would hear a psychedelic song, so to speak, along with Frank Sinatra on the same radio station, followed by the Kingsmen, and then maybe followed by the Kinks, or maybe followed by who knows what. We played with Duke Ellington, for crying out loud, in one venue. Now, that was radio, and it wasn't until about 1969 or 70 when they started to branch out and they played strictly pop music on one station, strictly rock and roll, grunge on another one. You know, you would listen into different radio stations to get different kinds of music. So we were still on the radio. Unfortunately, we were kind of out of touch because we were on the road so much that all we knew was we'd show up and play, and we'd listen to the radio in our cars, and you'd hear like one or two of these until it really became a movement back, you know, when the hippies took over 69 and 70.
I mean, what was the life like in the band towards like the later part of the 60s? Because I know that like the band went on a break, I think it was like 1968, 1969 when the band took their first break. I mean, like what was that like later part of the 60s like for you and the rest of the guys in the group?
Well, when we took a break from the road, we would just play the Northwest. We'd play the West Coast. We didn't really stop until about 69 or 70. We just, you know, instead of being out on the landscape of the country, we just stayed home because we could still play to big crowds in fairs and festivals in Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and still work quite a lot. So we didn't ever really stop until kids just were really into a totally different kind of music. And as I say, we took about, I don't know how many years off. We stopped playing nationally. We still played locally, but until Animal House hit. And then all of a sudden the agency started calling us again saying, you guys want to play this college or that college? And it was crazy because we would go out and, you know, where before it was kind of chaos dancing, now it was toga parties. Big college toga parties.
Yeah, I mean...
which was fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
No, you can't. You can't imagine. We played, I don't know what you know about the U.S. or not. I know most of your listeners are really well educated, and there's a college here that is a science college, basically, one of the top colleges in the world called MIT. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Well, they hired us to play their post-graduation dance. And when they helped us unload our gear, they started taking our amplifiers apart to see what made them work. And by the time we played, they had them all back together. They locked the doors so none of the faculty could get in. And no matter what you think would happen at a rock and roll concert, you have no idea how loose these guys got. They were doing everything you can possibly imagine in that gymnasium. I mean, everything. It was hilarious. We played 4 hours. They wanted us to play longer, so they passed a garbage can around to collect money. And they collected a garbage can full of money and brought it to us and say, will you play another hour? Okay, wow. So we did. It was hilarious. It was just too fun. That was the wildest group of kids we've ever played in front of.
And also during the 70s, can't remember what year Animal House came out, but I know that like in the early 70s, the band released their last like single in 1973. You Better Do Right on the A side and Today on the B side. Yeah, like how did those songs come to be? Like what was the direction the band wanted to go in?
Well, we had always just been a band that got up and played. No rehearsals. We didn't. If somebody wrote a song and we kind of liked it, you'd do it. If it didn't go over, it was just on an album or nothing. And we were playing the Northwest, mostly teen clubs, like I say, fairs and festivals. And we thought, well, let's take a shot and see what we could do. So we wrote a song together called You Better Do Right. And I had a friend down at Capitol Records. I worked there for a while during our hiatus in the publishing department. And I had a friend, Terry Slater. I sent him the tape, and he said, we like it. We want to release it. So they put it out. It didn't make a lot of noise. It was a pretty good record. It didn't make a lot of noise, mostly because it just wasn't promoted, and we didn't want to go out nationally and promote or go on television. We had done a lot of TV, and since we had done a lot of TV, television shows, except for Dick Clark, they didn't really want to have us on. We weren't what was hot. We were sort of has-beens, and so the record, it didn't do very well, but still we were pretty proud of it. It was the first time we had tried recording something really legitimately in stereo.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good record, and I mean, it sounds like like listening to like the Kingsmen stuff in the 60s and listening to that record, You Better Do Right, it sounds like you guys were trying to really embrace more the sound of the 70s on that record, at least to my ears.
Yeah, we were. It was a lot more modern. And, once that didn't work, Animal House came out. We just went back to doing what we've always done, and we still do it. We just go up and play and have fun. If somebody yells out a song, we do it. We rehearse on stage. We've never had a formal rehearsal since my first audition. We've never had formal rehearsals to learn music. We just start playing them. Do
you wish that the band released more like songs, like more albums, like new material? Like during the 70s, 80s?
I don't know. We've never been people to go backwards and say, I wish we would have done this or that. It has been such a fantastic ride that right now, we've been approached to do a tour in Asia. Yeah. And that might be fun, for this summer. I think people are slowly finding the Kingsmen again and knowing that we just go up and play. And, we've got really good musicians. We play really loud. We don't really care about the end sound as long as people are having fun. We'll play on whatever and wherever as long as they want to have fun. That's what we're all about.
Something I really want to draw attention to, too, is I had to listen to your 1979 solo album Magic, and I got to say I was really blown away. Like, you're really good musically, Dick. Like, your songs on that album are fantastic.
Thank you. It would have done even. I was number one in Japan. Yeah. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, they can't look that." Well, I was number one in Japan. I went over and toured there. It was received really well. Unfortunately, the album was on Epic Records, which is Universal, MCA. I think they were all one company at the time, Arista. But Epic is basically a huge label. Michael Jackson was also on the same label. What happened with me was I had recorded the album for CBS. Which Epic is a subsidiary. I had been working for Lamont Dozier for a few years, and some of the people that I had met wanted me to record an album, so I did. And I recorded it, and the people that I recorded it for were actually at MCA. Well, MCA Universal went under a huge transition where they fired most of their A&R people and promotion people, and you can go ahead and look that up if you want. And they had my album, and we wanted to buy the album for MCA from CBS. Mm-hmm. And so we approached CBS because all of my friends were moving to MCA. That's what it was. And I recorded it for CBS Epic, and my friends had moved they were fired from Epic and they moved to MCA. So we bought the album back, and we were about to release it. And we went to this record conference in Medem. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, we saw my album there. And this Japanese guy had it. And my manager at the time, Kerry, asked, well, how do you have this album? It's not been released yet. We just bought it back. And he said, no, I'm with Epic Records in Japan, and we have released it, and it's flying up the chart. Well, come to find out that CBS did not tell the international division they no longer owned the record. And so it was released and flew up the charts in Japan, and we got involved in litigation with CBS. At the same time, when they wanted me to come over and tour and do interviews and all, I went over and had quite a career in Japan for a while. I released 2 albums, and it never got released in the United States. It was just tied up. MCA thought it was too much trouble, and CBS then didn't, I didn't have a good feel with them because obviously we had sued them. The judge threw out the lawsuit because he said, I don't see how having a hit record somewhere in the world harms you. So it sort of ended that. And then I was in the MGM Grand Fire, and it kind of changed my life for a while. I took my money and started a horse farm and got out of music until the band started playing again, and I found myself. It was kind of fun.
And you mentioned there that they didn't release the record in America, and I was thinking as I was listening to it, I was thinking this should have been a massive hit, and it was in Japan, but I thought it could have done so well in the US market. I just think this is good stuff. As I was listening to it, I was thinking this is every song on this is musically great. I mean, great melodies, great this should have been a hit album.
Well, thank you. I believe so too, but sometimes the fickle finger of fate just gives you a little rub here and there, and I can't complain because I was dealt a fantastic crazy blow with Louie and the Kingsmen, and this is sort of just basically the opposite. I'm very proud of Magic. I think it went to number 1. It did at the time. It did better than Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. I went over and toured, and I produced a few Japanese artists. I became friends with a lot of Japanese artists, many fans over there. It was really crazy. I felt like the Ventures, they were bigger in Japan than they were in the U.S. I liked it. It was very period. It had a pop disco flavor to it, but I've always, like you, I've always wished it could have gotten heard more. Yeah. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. And look, just before we move off the Magic, I just wanted to highlight too. I mean, because there's a really good song on that I really like called "Can't Give Up," and musically great, just fantastic. I mean, how did you what was the writing process with that song, "Can't Give Up"?
Well, I've always since then, I've always just been inspired by either other people's stories or something that I was going through. And I have a friend, a longtime friend, whose daughter was going through a relationship that they were breaking up, but it was really a good relationship. And she really didn't want the relationship to end, and I don't think he did either. And so I really wrote the song for them.
I mean, when did you re-enter the Kingsmen? Because I think you were halfway explaining that to me before we started talking more about Magic, but when did you, because I know that the band, the Kingsmen, took a break during the disco era and then they kind of came back. When did you kind of, start playing with them again?
Well, like I said, I was in a major fire. It was the MGM Grand Fire. We had 86 people die there, and it was really a crazy experience. And I decided I was going to leave showbiz. Life was a lot more precious to me than what I was doing. And I was really involved in not only my Japanese career, but I also had quite a career in music production for television shows, mostly Christmas specials. And I learned how to produce from Lamont Dozier. He was my mentor, and I worked for him for 3 years. When I moved back to the Northwest after the fire and I started a horse farm, I thought I would get out of music. But when I came back up, Mike said we should get the band back together and just play around here. And so we did. We put together a group of guys, Mike and I and Barry, 3 of the originals. And we started playing around the Northwest, and then different agencies found out we were playing, and then we started going out and doing tours. We would jump on a tour and have some fun for a few months. We went out with Paul Revere, and we did a Coliseum tour for firefighters and police, trying to raise money for them. And we'd go out for a couple of months and play across the United States. It got to be fun again. And we've just kept doing that. We started playing fairs and festivals. Once booking agents find out and people find out that you are still working, gee whiz, here it is. All of a sudden now we're even getting offers from Asia. So we could be going to the Philippines and go over and do a show in Japan. It could be fun.
I want to thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today, Dick. I think it's been it's been really enjoyable talking with you.
Well, I'll tell you, if people want to find out more, I'm not pushing my book for sales, but I have a book out, Louie, Me Gotta Go Now by Dick Peterson. If they're interested in hearing more of these same stories, I wrote the whole story in that book. And so if they're interested, they can jump on louielouie.org, and there's links there. All those stories that you and I have discussed, plus many, many more, are in the book. People used to say, wow, you guys, we sit around, we reminisce. You guys ought to write a book. Well, I did. Hopefully people enjoy it. I've had some pretty good feedback from it.
My guest today on the show was drummer of the Kingsmen, Dick Peterson. If you want to keep up with the band, you can head to their website at louielouie.org. Remember to share this episode with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed this edition, we'd love it if you'd leave a review. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes. And to all those music lovers out there, stay groovy.